Welcome to BI for All Talks. Today we are here with myself, Orlando Anunciação, from the AI Center of Excellence at BI for All. And I have with me my colleague Hugo Mendes, also from our team, our Center of Excellence. We are here to talk about generative AI. We are living a revolution of generative AI. But more specifically, today we are going to talk about multimodal models. So we live a revolution with generative AI that has been changing the way we work, the way we plan things, the way we perform our tasks. And multimodal models are a new step on this. And so I would like to first ask my colleague Hugo. Hugo, what are multimodal models? Can you explain to our listeners?
Million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Which is a bit strange because we continue to, and we speak about this like almost every day in our work. So sometimes it's strange to try to put it in better words or it's in an easier way, which actually I think it's very straightforward. So we have models that might be very specific for extracting information from text. We also have models that are more based on image. We have other models that are more into computer vision and so on. And basically what multimodals became is that we have all of this in just one package, basically. So we can have the same model analyzing text, analyzing an image, analyzing an audio, without the need to create different models and create interconnections with them and so on. So it has become more easier for us as developers and trying to identify solutions and process huge amounts of data with different types. It's become easier to perform these actions because we can do it all of it in just like one model with a specific. Not all companies have models that can do all of it, but and we are going to discuss a bit on this. But it has become like this new step of the new models that are going to appear. Most 100% of them will be multimodal because there's a lot of information that we can extract from different types. There's a lot of high valuable data that we could input into our existing models that came from these types. And these models will help us achieve that in a easier and most understandable way.
Yeah, because when this, let's say, era of generative AI started, we usually mention ChatGPT when it was released, right? But there was also other models that were released more or less around the same time. For example, DALL-E to generate images. So at that time, we had several models. We had ChatGPT. We wanted to chat with the chatbot. Or if we want to generate an image, we would go to DALL-E, right? But now we can do everything in the same model, right? Yeah. And that's, I think, quite useful. As a personal example, for example, I had some flowers, or I bought some flowers for my wife, and what happened there was that I didn't know exactly which flowers were those. So I just put on, the multimodal model. I'm not going to say which one, because, but I think it was Gemini. So I put there, and it recognized the type of flower that it was. And the interesting thing is that then I told this to some of our colleagues, and I was told, yeah, but that already exists a long time ago in Google Lens and and other applications. Yes, but the point is, I don't want to have one application for each type of task. So now with the multimodal models, we use one model for many different tasks. And that I think is useful. You don't need to learn many different tools or to have many different apps installed on your smartphone or on your computer. You just use that one for everything, including recognizing the type of flowers that you have at home.
Just making like here connection with when people start buying the Bimby. So it can do all the meals can be prepared in just that thing. So instead of having one to do the cutting of the ingredients, one to do another thing, so we have here just like one appliance that will do everything. And this is like the way that we are always start looking at these multi models. Is that okay? I can just have one application and I can have all of these services and tasks that can be performed without me having to, okay, now I have to do this, I have to go to this one. Now I have to do this. If I have one that could, then how can I connect between them and so on and so forth. So this has been a huge help. And just connecting also with the example from that same company that did the model, the no promotions here, like the Gemini, they are doing some kind of publicities and marketing on using it for people to scan the ingredients and then ask with these ingredients what could be like a recipe or a plate that then the kitchen would perform for them. So it's like adding new ways of how we interact with our worlds.
So you can just take a picture to the ingredients, right?
Yeah, they have like the ingredients in a shelf.
Yeah.
So you just take it, the picture, they identify this is the ingredients, so on and so forth. You can take more of them, and then they go say, with this, some plates could be done. Or you can just say, okay, like with this, create a new dish or a type of dish that might not be so useful with this type of ingredients. So we are entering like an area of helping us being a bit more creative due to our sometimes limitation in terms of how we perceive the world and how we are creative in trying to think about new things. So this can be like a huge tool. Those multimodal models can be a huge tool just for us to go into that next step and try to be a bit more distinct on what we do and see that, okay, this makes sense. I'm happy with the results. I'm seeing that I can do a lot more now with this than I was able before, even if the models existed, but in separate ways.
I would also like to, introduce a little bit the topic of the applications of these type of models. So I already mentioned some that we use in our, day-to-day basis. Taking pictures. Once, for example, I passed I was flying over Paris, and the sky was clear. Sorry, and I was able to take a picture to the Eiffel Tower because it was dark, so the Eiffel Tower was illuminated. And I asked the Gemini also in this case, because I have it on my phone. And I asked, what is this? And it recognized that it was the Eiffel Tower. So it's very interesting. But these are the small applications of the day-to-day that are fun. And I advise everyone to try these kind of applications. But of course, there are other, let's say, types of applications more in the organizations and the revolution is at all levels. So it's on our day-to-day basis. It's on our work. So when generative AI came with ChatGPT, in fact, of course, we all know that it started before ChatGPT, yes. Right? The technology already existed, but okay. Let's say that it was with the release of ChatGPT. So when that started, companies started creating the so-called retrieval augmented generation systems, in which basically you are talking to your company's data, basically. So in these kind of systems, the organizations have a set of documents, and you can use a chatbot with a large language model to ask questions whose answers are on those set of documents. And that was one of the first major successes in terms of generative AI applied to the organizations. And it's currently one of the most important use cases. But of course, the documents usually are not just text. And companies have lots of documents also with images, with charts, with other types of graphics, and they can be quite tricky to understand for a machine, right? But the point is that with these new multimodal models, we gave one step further in order to understand completely the documents that exist in organizations. And we have an example here at BI4All in which we worked on a project in which we had to process large documents. Once again, we work with all the technologies. This one specifically was also with Google Gemini. And the point there was that we were able to process large PDF documents that contained, for example, charts. And we were able to ask questions to the chatbot, and the answer that was given to us was specifically based on one chart, not on the text. So that answer, the specific answer, was not described on the text. We checked; it was based on one chart. So it was a bar plot, and it was able to understand the bars, and that is quite interesting and really powerful.
Like problems in the beginning when we started developing these solutions is that we wanted to extract information like from graphs, because they were like in tables, and there was like a specific graph that could like had more or less the summarization of what we wanted to extract, and the solutions were not able to extract from that. So even if we make some questions, it would just bring, well, hallucinate a bit, so it would just like provide numbers that there were not there. And it was like a big mess because, well, they're saying, no, but ChatGPT can do all of this, so why can't it just extract information from images and graphs? So it was like a bit more of difficult for us to make sure and to give them the necessary information that, okay, this is still in this level of text, the image is still not possible, and so on. But we were most certain that this would be something in the future, and this is what we are now on that. What you were saying, that we can extract information from specific graphs and images specifically, and these new models, these multimodal models, can always extract information there without having it to be in a textual part of the document.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most exciting applications on this area. But of course, there are many others, and I don't know, maybe in terms of the health. In terms of the health,
we are seeing a lot applications on health. Of course, it's also a bit difficult for these new solutions to just like from one day to the other to be implemented in hospitals, for example, and perform. So here, when we are talking about some applications of these new models, is that the patient can have different types of information in different types of data. So we can have when it goes to the doctor and the doctor writes in their patient historical level of information, what it has, what was the past information, and so on. But then we have, like, for example, CT scans or X-rays or audios and so on that were not able yet to be processed, to be integrated in the existing information of the patient. And with these new models, we can have that step of extracting this information and make better patient profiles for each person, dependent on each type of text that they did or history. The part that is a bit more difficult is that we are talking about like very sensitive data. And in healthcare, we know that it's very difficult just for say, okay, yeah, you can extract all the information from my history of the past 10 years and just like profiling me and do whatever you want and so on. So there's many barriers yet for this type of solutions to integrate. There are a lot of universities, like for example, the university in Taiwan for medical school is already using like for radiologists and so on to extract some information, of course, in this more research level, but they are having like huge results in terms of new information that can extract, incorporate, for example, in already existing machine learning models that tries to predict some kind of type of information that they want to predict. And by having these new types of information from these new data types, they can incorporate in these models and get better results and have like the full spectrum of the patients and not just like be biased and just look for a specific set that can have more or less influence than the others.
Yeah, I think that's the major impact in healthcare with this use case, is that the hospitals or the doctors can have an integrated vision of the patient. So sometimes I don't know very well how it works inside the hospital, so I'm not a medical doctor or a healthcare worker, but it can happen that in the hospitals the information is in silos, so the people from one specialty know about that and about those exams and about those tests. People from other area know about their own exams, their own tests that condition that area. But with this we can integrate all the data, so we can have data that comes from images, from x-rays, from whatever, data from analysis, blood analysis or anything, and we can integrate all that and understand the patient in its whole. And I think that's a huge benefit. So of course, yes, there are those questions that have to be addressed, and they are important about the privacy of the patients and all that. For sure, they have to be addressed, but they shouldn't be an obstacle in order to bring this technology to the healthcare, because I think it's going to be very, very valuable. Yes, and it will maybe help doctors sometimes understand the real condition of a patient, because they can have everything in front of them, and the model can understand everything and can process
yeah. And we can see, like, for example, when we are like in an appointment, sometimes we go there, we speak with the doctor is just like listening to us, and then at the end he tries to make a report, so sometimes some information can be missing from the final report and so on. So, and it's like this information, because with the use of now of I'm not sure like the exact name, so it's like telemedicine, so we can like video chat with the doctor. There are a lot of applications that already do this, and a lot of hospitals that do this, and we can incorporate these new models that can understand the audio, that can extract information from the audio, already start creating the report, so that the doctor at the end, or the medical practitioner at the end, can analyze what was being said and say, okay, it's correct or not. So it's like you said, there's a lot of utility in this type of information that can like make the doctor focus exactly on the patient, and not just like another person that can have the same problem that the other person had, because sometimes just because there was a different variable there, it can be the pinpoint of saying, okay, this type of treatment might not work with this person, but this one might work because there was specifically the information extracted is the most correct that we can have so far. And I think it's very interesting, but again, with this kind of information about privacy, it's also always a process that takes some time for us to go into the step that we want it to be. But I don't think it's going to stop, so we know that this type of new ways of doing things and new technology will not prevent this kind of solutions to be into our real world, and we'll see that it brings more advantages than disadvantages. Just to connect now, we are looking at this part of the privacy, it's a bit, but then there are other applications that we can look also into the multimodal. And it's more in the part of the education and learning process, because we know that all of us have different ways of learning. So I know that for me, sometimes just looking at a text or a book full of text, for me it's enough to understand something. But for another person can be like a mix of videos with images, with text and so on. And by having these models that can interact with the way that we want to learn, I think it's amazing, because for example, I can speak with a chatbot about I have a PDF or a presentation that I want to read and to study, but the way that it's been there is not making me understand exactly what is the theme or it's going to be present there. So you can just provide it and ask him to make a summary or just give me an explanation and so on. And these new models, besides just giving text, it can give text, it can give an image, it can give different parts and pinpoint exactly in the document. So it makes the learning process, I think, more interactive and more adaptable to whatever it's the need of the person.
I think that the applications of the multimodal models on the education sector are very, very important. And I think the point here, because nowadays people are very concerned that artificial intelligence might steal their jobs. So I think the point here is not about stealing the jobs of the teachers, but think, for example, in places where there are no teachers or there are very small number of teachers. So in these situations, an agent prepared for teaching and specifically prepared for teaching specific topics, that can be something, it's a game changer. It can be a game changer, for example, in underdeveloped countries. Of course, maybe it's not that easy sometimes to make the technology get there, but even in those countries, people start having some smartphones and some devices that they can use to learn many topics. And in countries where there is no teachers, for example, in remote areas, for example, that can be something very, very good. So, of course, we need to continue evolving the technology to the point that these agents or these, let's say, teaching agents can be almost at the level of as the human, right? And I think that's also one of the best applications for multimodal models and the generative AI in general. Yeah.
Just to complement on this part, so that sometimes we are discussing or say, okay, this school in the interior of the part of our country has like just one teacher or just one school for like 20 or 30 children that need to do like 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers or even more just to go to the school. So that this could be just like one of the parts of these applications that could help, so that the students didn't have to do this struggle of going high distances just to have some kind of teaching. Sometimes the teaching is not the way that they are prepared because each children is a bit different. So we know that some children might learn better this way, others don't. And this could be just like an additional way of how to help reach like this level of education to children, to the community, in an easier and most adaptable way, so that the people don't have to go out of their like area of comfort. I know that normally sometimes we need to go outside of it. So for this case, it's just like too much when we ask like for children to go like 30 kilometers just to go to school to have some hours in terms of like education, where we could have with our cell phone, with a very defined teaching agent, like you said, just to, okay, I have it here. So we might discuss here part of the social part of skills, so that children, when they are in the same place, they interact a bit more, but we like see the weights of the pros and cons of what is the best approach. So it's not like the best solution, but it could help in many ways that we are not expecting.
Definitely. But I also think that generative AI has a role to play in education in the developed countries also. I don't think it will replace the humans, the teachers, but it will help them, sometimes finding different ways of explaining or different ways of answering to some questions. So I think all those capabilities are very useful in the classroom. Yes. So yeah, that's what I think. So changing a bit now the topic in terms of, I think we have been talking a lot about multimodal models. We mentioned mostly Gemini, not because we have a particular preference, but just it happened. In fact, we use also a lot ChatGPT 4o, so those are the two that we use more here, but we also can use others. But I think it would be also good for our audience to know a little bit which models are out there, and some of the characteristics. For example, Gemini, one of the things is that it's able to process a lot of data because it has a very long context window. It can process up to 2 million tokens, I believe. Yeah. So that means that we can, for example, if it's to send a document, we can send the whole document
like
together.
100 pages, 200
Yes.
pages.
So that's really, really good. But there are other models. I don't know if you want to mention other models.
Yeah, so I think we brought a bit here on the part of from Google's side, because it's one of the models that, as of now, in terms of like the dimension, it can process like almost every type of data. So it can go into audio, image, text, and so on. But then we have also the other big players as well. So we have the ChatGPT, and the 4o already starts having this part of the multimodal in like a level as the Gemini. Then we have also from Microsoft like the Phi 4, which is like a more of a small language model. So it can be very, very helpful to pinpoint in some specific tasks. Since it's not like a general purpose model, we might have here some deficiencies in terms of the outputs that we get from these models. But what we have been seeing is that now all big players are developing their own models to have this component. If one model is not being able, for example, to process audio or process image and so on, already has like a different model in that same level that can perform these tasks, so they can be implemented. But then we have also like Mistral, AWS is always also developing their own models and so on. So we have been seeing that multimodal is now the go-to when developing and trying to create new models, because the models that are just processing tests are not enough anymore, because we already saw the advantages of having one model that can interpret the same data in different ways. You can extract from the audio, extract the text, and the text from the audio can be like, for example, doing a sentiment analysis and so on and so forth. So for us to go a step back and say, now I just want one model that just processes the audio, and then the other one processes the text, and then the other one will do the other thing. I think as of now it's a bit, we are already past that step, so we are now at the level of everyone is trying to have the best multimodal model that can have.
Yeah, and definitely there are lots of players currently producing models. We have also the Chinese producing multimodal models. With DeepSeek, with Qwen also from Alibaba, so and probably others that I'm not mentioning. So we have all these players competing. We also see that there are multimodal models, but they're also producing reasoning models. So I also expect them to more or less merge at some point. Because of course one of the flaws from generative AI was it was not so good in the beginning, of course, to make reasoning. They have been working a lot. The major companies have been working a lot on that. So I think that's also one of the things that is happening and is going to happen. Another thing that I would like to point is, for example, Meta. So one of the advantages of Meta models is that they are open source. So anyone can download them and tweak them and change and do whatever. So that's, I think, is really interesting. Another thing is that the Llama 4 uses a mixture of experts. So it's a model that instead of having one architecture based on a transformer that processes everything, has several, let's say, sub-models on it. And that means that when it's performing some task, it doesn't have to have the whole model, let's say, turned on at the same time. That means that it may be more efficient in terms of
like energy consumption, and we see that like the CEO from OpenAI that says, okay, please stop generating images because our GPUs are melting and so on. So we see that having this architecture with a mix of experts can be very helpful to decrease a bit on our ecological.
Yeah, because when we look into
pattern.
the future, we have to understand that generative AI is going to be more used,
Yes.
maybe as much or more than what Google search engine is used now. And if we think on that scale, the consumption, the energetic consumption is, for example, of a question to a chatbot is much higher than making a search on Google. So of course there is still a lot to be done here in order to make the models more efficient energetically, because of course we want generative AI to help the planet, not to,
destroy
not to
it.
destroy it.
Yes, like you said, like by having the models that are already here, so now it's very difficult to say, okay, now you did this test, but forget about these multimodal models that just go back to what you're doing previously and not waste time, like in quotes, of having to process everything separate and so on. So with these new models and the reasoning that you're mentioning, I think this is going to be like the next step of from the image, from the audio, make the reasoning and so on and so forth. And I think it was like from Google research part that has like 4 levels, if I'm not mistaken. So with these models, we are more or less like in the 0 or in the level 1, which is the basic of extracting information. And then the second step, which is more in the like the making it as if it was a human interpreting the information, not just like from text, but from text, image, audio, and make the reasoning on all of it.
Yeah, so I think that for the future, we will have, definitely will have advances in terms of the efficiency of the models. So making them requiring less resources, so that you can, for example, install them on your device. Of course, you can install a small language model, but I mean, these more complicated models, at the moment you cannot do it because it requires lots of computational resources. But I believe that in the future, the models will probably become smaller. Probably the data will be more curated, the data that is used to train the models. Also, I think that, of course, these models are just in the beginning. It's very likely that they have many biases, different types of biases, that with time people will find out has these biases. Those biases will have to be corrected, addressed. So they will continue improving also on that. Yeah, so I think that, and of course, as we mentioned before also, that they will be integrated with other types of models, and we'll tend to have an ecosystem which is, we see it as one model, but it will be in fact an ecosystem of models that you can use for many different tasks. And each of those tasks can then be, let's say, improved with time. For example, as I mentioned, recognizing the flowers. Okay, in my case it worked. It recognized the flowers that I had. And then I Googled it and it was correct. But maybe other tasks, doesn't work so well. So probably in some of those tasks you need extra data, you need still to work a little bit on it. So I think that these models will have lots of, let's say, silent improvements over time, and also other improvements not so silent. But definitely I expect them to be able to reason better. I expect them to be more efficient, probably smaller. Yeah, that's what I would say for the future. Do you have any other idea in mind?
I completely agree with you in terms of its applicability. So we'll continue to see more developments on this. Maybe the fact, like you said, it's like having this ecosystem of all these models interacting with one another. Continue to have like the importance of, we still need to have like a human here in between in some cases, just to make sure that everything is okay and the data is correct on what we want or we are expecting. But yeah, I completely have the same vision in terms of how it's going to be, like, not going to say like in the next 2 to 3 years, because as we saw, like in just 1 year, the strategies in terms of AI completely changed with the appearance of ChatGPT and just like in the next year. So, but I see that it's going to have to be an exponential in terms of changes quicker than it was like with the previous technology revolutions that we observed.
So basically, definitely, we are living in very exciting times
Yes.
with so many things happening. It's such a good time to be alive, right? Let's hope that many positive things, right? We also see sometimes negative things,
Yeah.
but not so much in AI. In AI, I think we are still doing great.
This is what we are working on. Is
Yes,
that,
yes.
see the positive things because we don't want the negative things. Otherwise, it can be a bit chaotic.
Yeah, so I would invite all our listeners to keep, following the AI field.
Yes.
Because so many things are about
Very
to
interesting.
happen, and most of them we don't even imagine that they are going to happen.
I think that's the good
Even
part.
for us that we work on this field, of course we can, predict some things, but many things are going to be surprises. And so, thank you everyone for listening to this podcast. I invite also, if you would like to ask any questions or have any doubts, you can drop a comment and we'll address them later. So once again, thank you and see you next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.